Hello all, welcome to the video, c'est moi, Ren, and today we are drawing one character in different animated styles as well as working them into each cinematic universe respectively. If that doesn't quite make sense, too bad, you'll just have to keep watching. So this is my OC, Atlas. I started drawing her in my own style, which in some ways was the hardest because I don't have a style, so I was just picking it up as I went along. As I do more of these, Atlas will no doubt change a bit design-wise, though the core elements will stay the same. So for my style, I have been having fun with pencils lately. I like muted tones and very loose line work and shading. Loose not in a swoopy or curvy way, but in a some lines are thicker than others and most of them are not perfect, but don't worry about it way. I really like the shading and freedom you can get from pencil brushes, and it makes me feel a lot less stressed when I draw, which was always a good thing. I'm not quite sure why I chose animated styles for this, because they are all tiny thin line work that has to be perfect, and that took so long. Anyways, Atlas visually has very short dark hair, kind of stoops to the side, a sort of longer nose, definitely not a small nose, and very red coloring on her cheeks and nose. She has a stronger jaw, at least not a incy squinchy princess jaw, and likes to wear grunge clothes and sweaters, lots of bracelets and earrings, ripped skinny jeans, she's a legend. She also has very low and long eyes that are very good for staring daggers at people, but are hard to match to each other since faces can be weird. As for who she is, Atlas is an OC I've had for a couple of years. She does have quite a story, let me tell you. Boy howdy does she have a story. But in general terms, she's part of a story called Cathedral, where she and a bunch of other bird people called avians attend a school and then save the world probably a bunch of times. It's really great, and you'll probably see them roundabout on my channel since I love them very much. She's very dear to my heart. To summarize, Atlas has a dark, sharp color scheme with raven and bird motifs. The pages and pages I have written for her may one day see the light of day, but as for now, you'll have to be content with the fact that she a bird girl, and a sad one at that. So let's jump into the first real style. The show I started with is Steven Universe. I began with pulling up references to different characters that had a similar body type to what I was going for, and various accoutrements that I might need, such as eye shape, feet, hair, that kind of a thing. I also ended up getting an entirely new set of references for every single show, so if you see different pages flipping back and forth during the speed paint, that's what that is. Another thing I had to find a reference for was ears, specifically for Steven Universe. I was thinking about it, and generally I don't think that gems have ears. I had to go ask Reddit about it, and Reddit said there are two instances when ears are sort of shown, one with amethyst and one sort of with pearl. So I'm going to give her ears, since I am going with the narrative that because she's a gem living among humans, the crystal light she uses to generate her features are more human-like, and she has ears. I would guess that gems don't hear the same way that humans do, obviously, so they don't need to generate ears unless they're living on Earth and particularly are trying to blend in the human with population. So it is possible, but they probably don't need it, which is why you don't see them very often. Anyways, I just sort of mentioned that Atlas in this story would be a gem living on Earth in secret among the humans. So she disguises herself as a human and has shape-shifting abilities similar to an amethyst, though her general shape and structure would be the same as when she was originally formed as a gem. Her backstory is that she lives in a bigger city, and her mother gem, quotation marks, was a jasper that stayed on Earth from the First War and was slightly in charge of creating other amethysts or whatever, so she knew how to create gems on Earth, so she made Atlas in secret after they left because she wanted a daughter or something, I'm not quite sure. So Atlas lives among the human society and has to hide her gem, which is in the small of her back. The gem she has is called Black Kyanite, which looks very pointy and a little bit like raven wings. It symbolizes her very well. It also represents cutting ties and protecting yourself from dangers with a protective aura, which I thought suited her pretty well since she is a more defensive person and protective of herself and those around her. As for the actual drawings I'm doing, Steven Universe has a lot of very round lines and very strong shape language, I think is the word. They use a lot of geometric shapes and structures to build each character. I definitely played it kind of safe and made her look a lot more like just a human, which I can write off as part of her backstory, but honestly it's because I'm a little afraid of making Garnet or Peridot. Another thing I kind of didn't anticipate was coloring practices. Definitely I wanted to make it look like the actual style of the show, so what I ended up doing for coloring purposes was screenshotting and clipping a bunch of small images and just pulling colors directly from there and adapting them to the kinds of colors I was going for with my original drawing. I also had entirely finished the first drawing when I decided that I wanted to make a second drawing of her as an original gem form. So I did a couple of quick sketches where the gem is in her back if she had a very low shirt on or something. I mean, of course, she usually hides it because she's human and living in the secret society. It's very cool. But then I did a couple of sketches just off the cuff of what I was thinking she might look like as an original gem. I took that and used the same liner I did for the first image to make it match very closely so that it looked very cool together, and changed a couple of things, mostly just taking off her clothes and making a kind of bodysuit. I really struggled with the markings on the bodysuit. It was hard to find something that looked sort of natural but also fit with the rest of her aesthetic. In her gem form, her purpose would be as a travel protector, a kind of driver and bodyguard for dignitaries that don't need a full Ruby protection squad, but need more travel expertise than just flying the ship through empty space, which a Ruby could handle. So, more of a singular protector and driver for a more important gem, but not a full bodyguard squad or large ship to direct them in. With that, I gave her, of course, a bodysuit kind of a thing. I used diamonds on her knees to make it look more like protective gear, like knee pads. Another thing with the coloring and shading is that I added shading. I don't think the show generally has any shading at all, but I wanted to make it a little bit more three-dimensional, and that's what I think the shading would look like if Steven Universe used it all that much. They do occasionally, and of course in her jacket you can see there are a couple of colored lines. That's Pearl's jacket has a couple of those as well, so I thought it counted. So here are the final products for the Steven Universe version of Atlas. I think they look pretty neat. I really like the simplified shapes and the weight that the line art has. It's very thick, much thicker than I usually do. Okay, on to the next one. Young Justice is a very dumb show that I love very much. It's about teenage superheroes, more or less all of the Justice League's children, adopted, illegitimate, real, or clones. The style is extremely sharp and flat, with basically everyone falling into three main body types. Like, this is the most unique body type, and it's basically just Superboy with a smaller waist. Anyway, I absolutely adored the show in middle and high school-ish, early high school anyway, and I was obsessed with everything about it. Young Justice AMVs are actually how I found music like Evanescence and Christina Perri and a bunch of others. It literally formed my emo middle school years. As for drawing in the style, it was a little tricky, particularly the legs threw me for quite a loop. Like, just look at these. The calves are ridiculous. But it was fun trying to exaggerate very different body types than Steven Universe does. For the line art, I found this pen tool called the Milli Pen. I believe it just came with Clip Studio Paint. It has basically no tapering and just solid lines. I used full black for the line art because that's the closest I thought it looked like, and I tuned up the stabilizer quite a bit for smooth line art purposes. As for how Atlas will work into the story, here's what I got. Her father is a superhero and probably fights with the Justice League sometimes, but isn't directly a part of it. He's like not on the main crew. They're both Earthbound, so no Martian action, and she joins the Young Justice team in the early seasons because she is related to a hero but doesn't have any powers, very similar to Artemis and Green Arrow. She joins as kind of an extra team member, with her basic skills being very sneaky and quiet, incredible balance, pretty strong upper body and core type, and a coordinator. So she's never in the running for team leader, but is excellent at finding and analyzing plans of buildings and structuring different options for entry points and such. As it turns out, though, she does have powers, but they are dangerous and not all under control yet. So she is secretly training with a few of the Justice League members to learn how to control it and to not damage her own body or others when she uses it. It starts out as a secret, but each of the Young Justice members find out through fun episodes and all that cool stuff, with Robin and Artemis being the first and Wally last, of course. So, for the power, her actual power is kind of a Hulk-like transformation into this winged, clawed creature, kind of ravenish, with black feathers all over the body and these talon-like claw hands and legs. If you could just imagine monstrous Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, Ghibli, mixed with the Beast from Belle, the anime movie. If you just scrunkled those and added a bit more monstery, that's what I picture it as. Here's a couple of sketches I did, just brainstorming how it would pan out. So, as she trains, she learns how to transform only certain parts of her body and keep control over the whole beast, and use it to safely help others instead of just lash out at whatever's in front of her. So she's mainly a defensive fighter, and is very protective of herself and her close friends and family, just like in Steven Universe. When working on her actual costume, I went pretty simple, just with some spiky shapes to give it more of a Raven aesthetic, and a more armored chest plate with another of the crystals. It looks very similar to the Steven Universe one, just because I thought something should be in the middle and it might look interesting. Very spiky, a lot darker blue. I was originally going to do a browny red, but I thought leaning into the Raven thing would be cooler. I also had some trouble with the mask, you'll probably see that. And I ended up going with a lot more dramatic mask in the end, which I added on kind of later. I also changed her hair color in the superhero form, just so that it would not clash as a red-brown with the rest of the blue-gray kind of a thing. All in all, I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. It looks really nice, and I don't think I would question it too much if it was in the Young Justice universe, which is basically what we're going for here. Here's the final Atlas in Young Justice, in her civilian form and in her superhero outfit. Okay, last one up is Ghibli. Since Studio Ghibli has so many different movies and different styles, I approached this one a little bit differently. I wanted to do one casual outfit, like Whisper of the Heart or Kiki's Delivery Service, and then do the other one in a transformed style of a more fantasy Ghibli movie like Nausicaa or Tales from Earthsea. The Ghibli style is filled with round and soft shapes and a kind of thickness that was really hard to replicate, but was very characteristic of their clothes and features. Again, I used a very thin line art, and I used the same Millie pen as the Young Justice drawing, though I made it slightly bigger and left it more of a red tone to give the drawing a bit more warmth. The proportions for Ghibli are also very different from the other two. They have a variety of shapes and lengths for different kinds of people, and I tried to model her after Howl for a little while with a very small torso and legs for days, but ended up settling a bit more down in Nausicaa and On Your Mark territory. Most of the females have pretty simple faces in the Ghibli movies, so I left her face mostly round and soft, though I tried to work in a little bit of that incredible structure that the older men always have. Another thing about Ghibli art is they have very low-set faces, or some mix of low faces and high hairlines, that gives that very characteristic thick hair on the top of the head kind of look, which I tried to follow by showing a bit more of the forehead than I normally would with my own style. Shading was also quite an interesting venture. A lot of Ghibli is very minimalist, though they always seem to have exactly the amount of depth and detail that's needed to make a character feel complete, so I stuck with very large, swoopy shadow areas that connected across materials, and ended up hand-picking each of the colors for the flats instead of just doing a single color shading technique. I also don't think I mentioned it, but all of these animation styles use cell shading, since that is the easiest to track for 2D animation, I think. In my own work, I use a mix of cell shading and blended stuff, depending on how complicated the characters need to be, and I've been doing a little bit more of a painting shading style recently. These animations use extremely sharp and strong shading that I think I could learn from a little bit and be a little more dramatic with how I light things. You may have also noticed that each of the styles I chose to replicate in this video are from shows that I care a lot about and have impacted my art in some way. Ghibli has easily done the most out of the three. I won't get into it too much, but I love Ghibli and Miyazaki like no other art thing ever, and I would highly recommend you watch all of this stuff. Okay, moving away from sappy stuff, let's talk about the story. There's a couple of good options. There could be more of a Cat's Return kind of situation where she starts out in everyday life and then enters a fantasy world, or the two drawings could be from completely different stories. Atlas, in the casual wear, could very much just be her as her own story takes place, though admittedly with fluffier jackets and softer hair, perhaps caught up in some dramatic first love drama, and thus leaving the city to find peace in Mother Nature. The more interesting idea to explore is the fantasy one, for which I've come up with this. Atlas is a city-side smuggler who moves various contraband across the city and such, traveling to different cities as well, but secretly saving slaves or trapped animals in her travels, using the smuggling as a cover for all of her good actions. The city would be very corrupt and she would be decently well known as a smuggler, but all of the officials would partake in whatever business she runs, and so, being so corrupt, they let her function under the radar, and she secretly does good deeds and stuff while they think she's pirate trash. Plus, I had this idea, what if she made up a kind of guild or gang that she was a part of that has a terrible reputation for killing others who mess with them, but they don't actually exist, it's just to protect her from anyone messing with her? And she would do that by, whenever there was a mysterious murder of any kind, she starts rumors that it was this secret gang and people spread it around like wildfire until the word of the gang is just enough to put anybody off. For these final drawings, I'm really proud of how they came out, especially the fantasy markings on the one. It just kind of came to me and I thought it looked really cool how it ended up. I would have done more styles, but my self-imposed deadline was rapidly approaching and I had to stop at 3 shows, so if you have other shows or art styles you'd like me to see either try my hand at drawing-wise or write a character into, let me know. Comment them down there in the comment section where the comments go, and I will watch you from the window. Don't make any typos. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this kind of more rambly video and about writing and characters and such. It was actually super fun to make. I thoroughly enjoyed trying my hand at drawing different styles. Last little plug, I know I've been very loud about my Patreon. I will chill it out a little bit. But it was new and I was excited about it. So that is an option if you want to support me there. I post a lot of work in progress stuff, all my videos early. It's a it's there. It's a thing. $2 a month will get you access to all of my stuff that I post, everything, all of the things. And $10 a month will get your name in the end of all of my main videos. Anyways, have a nice rest of your existence.